So, Social Security. Boy, that question comes up a lot. And the question is I get in retirement or near retirement? Chase, if there are some takeaways, what do we need to know about Social Security and turning it on?
Yeah, so to your point, Dave, this is really one of the number one questions that we get from a lot of our clients as far as Social Security. And really, there really is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to Social Security. You have really two sets of thinking, right? One is, hey, I'm going to turn on Social Security as early as possible, which is age 62.
Boy, we hear that all the time, right? That usually comes with someone who saw something on the internet that said the government's going to run out of money, and so get money while you can before Social Security ends, which, by the way, we don't think that's any possibility that that's going to happen. We can have that discussion at another time. I don't think that's a valid concern.
I agree. And then there's a second camp that says, hey, I'm going to let my Social Security check grow as long as it possibly can grow, which is age 70. You can let it grow until age 70 because I want my check, to be as big as possible.
Yeah, and just as a caveat there really is no reason to, even if you didn't need the money, to wait beyond 70 because the check doesn't get any bigger.
Correct.
That's just money that doesn't go into your pocket. So even if you're getting taxed on it at 70, you'd want to turn it on.
Yep.
But to your point about is that the best answer, the answer really is not necessarily. It all depends on the person, doesn't it? So, boy, if there was one takeaway we could tell everybody today, it would be there isn't one answer to when do I turn on Social Security.
Yeah, and really what folks don't know is as a married couple, there's over 400 different ways you could turn on Social Security. If you were looking at your Social Security statement, that's not what you would think, right? They have about 3 different ways on there, but it's really quite fascinating. A ton of different ways that you can turn that on.
Right, and the answer, of course, is how do you decide how to do it? Is you have to take into consideration. All the variables, and there's quite a few. So what are some of the variables to consider when you're deciding when and how to implement your Social Security plan?
Yeah, I think one of the bigger ones is your tax situation. So this goes to our previous discussions, Dave, where really when we're making these decisions, we want to look at the whole picture. And to give you, a brief example about how your taxes could be implicated, depending on where you live, the state that you're in, your pension, may or may not be taxed as far as state income tax goes. And your Social Security check can actually be taxed anywhere from 0%, not being taxed at all the way up to possibly 85% of your Social Security tax or Social Security check, being taxed. So that's all the things.
So taxes is one.
Yep.
Right. Another one thing to consider would be, do you need the money?
Exactly.
Right. So you've hit retirement now. You don't need the money. Let's say you're living off a pension, or you've got rental properties and you've got rental income, and you don't need the Social Security income. You may want to wait to let it grow so that it's there. Think of it like an inflation hedge or something. So that would be a reason you might possibly wait.
Right.
Right.
Not only that, if you do end up waiting, let's say you're retired and you do end up waiting and maybe you don't have a pension, well, you're going to have to pay for the bill somehow, right? We're either going to have to take that from savings or we're going to have to turn on the Social Security check early. Now, whenever we talk to clients, when we're talking about Social Security, if you need the money for income, generally speaking, we recommend turning that on because we're confident that that check is going to be there, and you also get the cost of living adjustment, which we could talk about a little bit later.
Boy, too true, but even that depends, right? Because it depends on how much you have in other funds, and what the plan is for those other funds. So, if you had a huge bucket of other money, you may want to use some of your IRA or 401k money for 6 or 7 years and let the Social Security check grow.
Absolutely.
But if you don't have a lot of money, we don't want to drain your savings to zero. So now your Social Security check comes on later, but you don't have any money saved for other stuff, fund money or emergencies. So that's yet another variable. Another thing to consider would be, if we're thinking about turning it on early, well, if you're going to work part-time, then there's an offset, and that's a fancy way to just say that the government actually would reduce your Social Security check if you're earning too much.
Right.
But that's only if you're working, if you turn your Social Security on, Chase, isn't it, before what they call your full retirement age. That's a government term, and all that means is there's an age of what they basically says your full retirement age, but usually between 66 and 67 based on the year you're born. So if you turn your Social Security check on before your full retirement age, you could be subject to a reduced check, not just for turning it on, but because you're also having an income.
Exactly.
So it's yet another variable. But it's good to know, after your full retirement age, you could turn the Social Security check on and you could be making $100,000, $200,000 a year and you still get your full check. So just another thing to think about.
Yeah, no, and really another thing to think about when we're talking about turning on Social Security and making that decision is longevity, right?
That's true.
Everyone's family history is a little bit different. Everyone's medical situation is a little bit different. So if, for example, if we're betting on longevity, a long life, we're thinking, mid-90s, hundreds, whatever the case may be, we may want to wait to turn on that check because we're going to need this check to last for the long haul.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know this too, but everyone knows you get cost of living adjustments with Social Security. What a lot of people don't know is that increase is based on the amount of your Social Security check, the amount when you turned it on.
Right.
So if you wait
Right.
till 70, it's a bigger check. So 10% of a bigger check is a bigger increase to your Social Security.
Yep.
That gets a little technical, but to your point, waiting longer is a bigger check.
Right.
And for a longer period of time, that could work. Conversely, if there's something in your life or your family history, a great example would be Granddad Warren.
Yep.
Right. Your grandfather, right, and my father-in-law, right, is he, for medical reasons, did not expect to live past 65 or 66. So if you've got medical conditions and you do not think you're going to have longevity, boy, that's an example where turning it on early, something is better than nothing. Even if you only got it for 4 or 5 years, 62 to 65 is better than waiting when you get nothing.
Exactly. And to your point, and I'm glad you brought up Granddad Warren, because I think this kind of speaks to the next thing that someone should consider. There's two other benefits when it comes to Social Security. So you have the spousal benefit and also the survivor benefit. And without getting too much into the weeds about it, these are two benefits that you definitely need to consider when you're turning on your Social Security check.
Yeah, so the spousal benefit, a good example of that would be, a lot of folks don't even know this, right? You may have a couple, right, a husband and a wife, and one of them may have worked for the last 30 years, and as a result, they're entitled to a pretty large Social Security check. The other spouse may have not worked at all, may have raised the kids and been a homemaker, right? And as a result, they may not even qualify for Social Security. They didn't work enough credits, enough credits, enough working hours.
Right.
So they're thinking they're not eligible. That is not true. Because you're married, right, you are eligible to get a spousal benefit that in general can be equal to about half of your working spouse's Social Security. So that's just something to another thing to factor in.
Yep.
We talk about the survivor benefit.
Yeah, so the way that your survivor benefit works as a couple for Social Security is the larger of the two checks, the surviving spouse ends up keeping the larger of the two checks. So when we're doing Social Security planning, we really want to think about, hey, if we know one Social Security check is going to be quite a bit larger than the other, maybe, now again, we don't want to make any blanket statements here, right? But maybe we want to let that check grow a little bit larger, being as it's really for both spouses.
Yeah, so there's never an always situation, but it often happens that maybe you take the bigger check and let that grow to 70.
Right.
And then the smaller check, we might turn on early.
Right.
So we're getting that because the smaller check is the first one to go if one of you dies, and the larger check is the last one to go when the second of you dies. So you're right. It's a lot to think about, a lot of variables. And in future YouTube's fireside chats, like I like to call these the fireside chats, we can get in more detail on individual topics. So folks can stay tuned and listen to the other topics anytime they want.